My crush said, "Don't tell anyone." I replied, "Our secret is safe with me." I didn't realize then how much those words would stick with me, circling in my head long after the moment had passed. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. I'd been killing time at the small bookstore on Main Street, the kind of place that still smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, with a bell that chimed too loudly when the door opened. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just thumbing through secondhand novels like I usually did when I didn't want to go home yet. That's when she walked in. She moved like someone who'd been here before, who knew where everything was, yet took her time anyway. Mid-40s, dark hair with a few strands of silver catching in the overhead lights. She had this way of standing, not stiff, not careless, but as if she was always half aware of being watched. Her coat was folded over one arm, a pair of reading glasses hooked into the neckline of her blouse. I noticed her before she noticed me. Or maybe she did notice me, and just didn't let it show. She paused near the counter, asking the owner something in a voice that carried but wasn't loud. Confident. Familiar. Then she drifted toward the shelves where I stood, scanning titles like she had all the time in the world. I shifted slightly, pretending to study the back of a book I didn't care about. "Excuse me," she said, brushing past to reach for a hardcover on the top shelf. Her hand brushed mine for the briefest second. I froze. She didn't. Not exactly. Her fingers lingered a beat longer than they had to before she pulled back, cradling the book against her chest. A small, almost imperceptible smile curved at the corner of her mouth, though her eyes didn't meet mine. The silence stretched. Too long for strangers. "Don't tell anyone," she murmured, low enough that I almost thought I'd imagined it. I blinked, confused. "What?" Her eyes flicked up then, sharp, deliberate, holding mine with an intensity that made the air feel suddenly heavier. "That I read these trashy romance things," she said, lifting the book slightly, as if it explained everything. Her tone was light, but the pause that came before it wasn't. I managed a half-smile. "Your secret's safe with me." She gave a quick laugh, soft and low, and tucked the book under her arm. Then, just like that, she moved on, drifting further down the aisle as though nothing had happened. But the space between us stayed charged, like static after a storm. I tried to keep browsing, though I didn't read a single word on the pages in front of me. Every few minutes, I caught myself glancing toward where she stood, tilting her head at another shelf, tapping the edge of a cover like she was testing its weight. She didn't look back at me, not once, but I swear she knew I was watching. Eventually, she made her way to the register. The bell over the door chimed again as she left, her coat swinging lightly at her side, the book tucked neatly into a paper bag. I stood there a little too long after, the phrase still circling in my mind, "Don't tell anyone." She had said it like a joke, but I couldn't shake the way it felt, like it meant something else entirely. And I knew, walking home that evening with empty hands, that I wasn't going to forget her anytime soon. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. 2 days later, I stopped by the same bookstore after class. The place was quieter this time. Late afternoon sunlight filtering through the tall windows, dust motes hanging like suspended thoughts. The bell chimed behind me, and when I turned, there she was. She was balancing a stack of books against her hip, awkwardly, like she'd taken more than she intended. One slipped, nearly tumbling to the floor. Instinct pushed me forward. "Here." I caught it before it fell, pressing it back onto her pile. She blinked at me, then gave a small smile. "You again." Her tone wasn't dismissive, but it wasn't exactly warm either. Guarded, as if she had built a little wall and set it down carefully between us. "I come here too much," I admitted, shrugging. "You're young," she said, shifting the books onto the counter. "You're allowed." I wanted to ask what she meant, but her attention was already drifting, to the register, to her phone, to anywhere but me. Still, I noticed things I hadn't the first time. How she rubbed her wrist absent-mindedly, the faint circles under her eyes that makeup didn't quite hide, the way her laugh, when the cashier made some light joke, was softer than it should have been, like it cost her something. When she stepped aside to slip her receipt into the bag, I found myself blurting, "Do you want me to carry those for you?" Her head turned, and for a second, her expression cracked. Not a smile, Not annoyance, something else. Something tired, almost vulnerable, like she wasn't used to being offered help. "That's kind," she said, her voice quiet. A hesitation lingered in the space between us. Then she shook her head. "I've got it." I nodded, but the moment stuck, the way her grip tightened around the paper bag as if she needed the weight of it. We walked out at the same time, the late day air cooler, the street sounds muffled in a way that made me too aware of the nearness of her. I slowed my steps without meaning to, letting her set the pace. At the corner, she paused. Her bag shifted against her side, and she glanced at me briefly, lips parting like she might say something. Instead, she just exhaled, a long, quiet breath, and gave a small shake of her head, as though dismissing a thought she didn't want to risk. That was when it hit me, the strange gravity between us. She was keeping distance, and yet, the way her eyes lingered, the silence she left hanging, pulled me closer without her meaning to. Before crossing the street, she looked back once, a fleeting glance that felt like it carried more than words. I didn't call after her. I didn't need to, because even in her silence, I'd already heard something I wasn't supposed to. It was raining the third time. Not the kind of storm that shakes windows, but a steady, soaking rain that blurred the city lights into streaks on the glass. I ducked into the bookstore again, shaking water from my jacket, and found her already inside, sitting at the little reading table by the window, a half-empty coffee cooling at her elbow. She looked up when I walked in, not surprised, almost expectant. "Guess you're following me," she said lightly. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. I laughed under my breath. "Or maybe you're following me." That earned me a quick glance, sharp, fleeting, before she gestured to the empty chair across from her. I sat down, trying not to feel like it meant more than it should. For a while, neither of us said much. She flipped through a book, tapping her nail against the margin as though distracted. I watched the rain trace lines down the glass, listening to the hollow sound of drops against the awning outside. The air smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and wet pavement. She broke the silence first. "It's strange, isn't it? Running into the same person this often. Strange good or strange bad?" I asked. Her lips pressed together. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her coffee, took a sip, and winced when she realized it had gone cold. I noticed the way her hand trembled just slightly as she set the cup down again. Something tugged at me then, the urge to ask if she was okay, if something was weighing on her. But the word stuck, and then her phone buzzed on the table. She turned it over quickly, face tightening as she read the name. She didn't answer, just silenced it with a firm tap and pushed the phone away. "Everything all right?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes met mine, steady but tired. "Some things you don't talk about." Her voice had that guarded edge again, but softer this time, almost like she wanted me to press. I didn't. I just nodded, though my chest felt tight with questions. The rain grew heavier, beating harder against the glass. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling, her shoulders loosening for the first time all evening. "You ever feel like you're sitting too close to something you shouldn't touch?" The words hung between us. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because she wasn't talking about books anymore, and we both knew it. Her hand brushed the table edge, close to mine. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin radiating across the small gap. My fingers twitched. Then the bell above the door rang. A customer stepping in, shaking water from their umbrella. The spell broke. She pushed her chair back, standing a little too quickly. I should go. I stayed seated, watching the door swing closed behind her, rain swallowing her figure as she disappeared into the night. And for the first time, I wanted to follow. The rain had cleared by the time I saw her again, but the streets still carried the smell of it. Damp asphalt, wet leaves, a coolness that clung to the air. She was inside the bookstore, standing near the travel section, though she wasn't really looking at the books. Her arms were folded, her gaze somewhere far away. I hesitated before walking over. This time, she noticed me first. "You always appear when I least expect it," she said softly, as though the thought had been sitting on her tongue already. I gave a half smile. Maybe we're both just bad at pretending we don't want to run into each other. The words came out too quickly, and I almost wished I could pull them back. But she didn't laugh, didn't deflect. Her eyes stayed on me, steady, unreadable. A long pause settled between us. She shifted slightly, her hand brushing against the spine of a book she hadn't opened. Then, without looking away, she said, "What are we doing?" Her voice was quiet, but it cut through me like thunder. I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, thick, like the room itself was holding its breath. I heard the faint hum of the overhead lights, the muted sound of someone flipping pages in another aisle. But between us, nothing. Just her question, lodged in the air. "I don't know," I admitted finally. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. Her expression flickered. Relief, maybe, or fear, I couldn't tell. She leaned back against the shelf, exhaling as though she'd been holding something in too long. "This isn't." She stopped, pressing her lips together. "You're young." "I'm not." "People will." She cut herself off again, shaking her head. I wanted to tell her I didn't care, that I wasn't thinking about people, but instead, I stayed quiet, because I didn't want to make it easier for her to walk away by saying the wrong thing. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we weren't saying. The way her eyes lingered too long on mine. The way my hands itched to move but didn't. The way her breath caught for just a second before she forced it steady again. Finally, she whispered, almost to herself, "This can't mean anything." And yet she didn't step back. She didn't move away. Her words were firm, but her posture betrayed her. The slight lean toward me, the way her fingers tightened against the edge of the shelf, as though anchoring herself. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Then why does it feel like it does?" Her eyes closed for a moment, and when she opened them again, they were wet. Not from tears, not exactly, but from something she couldn't quite hide. She looked at me like she wanted to say more, like she was standing on the edge of something dangerous. But instead, she whispered the line that's been echoing in me ever since. "You make me forget how old I am." We hadn't planned to see each other. At least, I hadn't. But when I pushed open the bookstore door that Saturday, she was there again, tucked into the corner table with a cup of tea and a notebook open in front of her. This time, she didn't look startled. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back messily, a strand falling loose against her cheek. The notebook wasn't filled with words, just scribbles, a few lines crossed out hard enough to tear the page. I hesitated, then slid into the chair across from her. She didn't tell me to leave. "You write?" I asked, nodding toward the notebook. She let out a dry laugh. "Not anymore. Not well." She closed it gently, as though embarrassed by its contents. Silence stretched between us until she spoke again, softer. "You remind me of someone." I tilted my head. "Who?" Her eyes stayed fixed on the tea, steam curling faintly upward. "My brother's friend. Years ago. He was kind, restless, always hanging around, always trying to make me laugh." She paused, her lips pressing together. "He died in his 20s. Car accident." The words landed like a stone dropped into water, rippling through me. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. "I'm sorry," I managed, but it sounded too small. She shook her head quickly, as if brushing the apology away. "It's not that. It's just, sometimes, when you're around, I hear his laugh. Or I see the way he used to lean against door frames, like the world wasn't heavy yet. And it knocks the air out of me." Her voice trembled slightly, the first time I'd heard it lose its composure. She reached for her tea, but her hand lingered against the cup as if it were the only thing grounding her. I didn't move closer, though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I let the silence hold us, heavy and fragile. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes sharper now, searching. "You have no idea what that does to me. To be reminded." I swallowed hard, my heart hammering in a way I couldn't hide. "Maybe it's not about the reminder," I said quietly. "Maybe it's about the fact that you let yourself feel it." Her gaze didn't break. For the first time, she didn't look like she wanted to run from what was hanging between us. She looked like she was bracing for it. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, she said, "You're the first person in years who makes me feel like I'm still alive." It was late when it happened. The bookstore had already closed, but we lingered outside under the awning, the hum of streetlights overhead and the faint sound of traffic rolling in the distance. She held her coat tighter around her shoulders, though the night wasn't cold. I stood beside her, close enough to hear her breathing, steady but shallow. Neither of us spoke at first. Words had been worn thin between us, stretched by everything unsaid. Finally, she broke the silence. I've been trying to stop this. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was soft, tired, like she'd carried the weight of those words for weeks. I turned to her, searching her face in the dim light. And her eyes flicked to mine, then away, then back again, like she couldn't decide where it was safe to look. And I can't, she whispered. I don't even know what this is supposed to be, but it won't leave me alone. The air between us shifted, denser somehow. I wanted to reach for her, to erase the doubt carved into her brow, but I stayed still. You think I know? I said quietly. I'm just as lost as you are. She gave a small, unsteady laugh, the kind that wasn't really laughter at all. We shouldn't be here. Not like this. Then why are we? Her shoulders slumped, her hands gripping the strap of her bag. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she let the bag drop gently to the ground, freeing her hands. She rubbed one wrist absently, the way I'd seen her do before, and said, "Because I stopped being able to pretend." That was when the silence turned unbearable, not the kind that pushes people apart, but the kind that pulls them together, closer with every second they hold it. She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes stripped of all the walls she'd been building. Vulnerable. Human. Without thinking, I reached out. Not for her face. Not for anything reckless. Just her hand. Her fingers tensed when mine brushed them, but she didn't pull away. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she let her palms settle into mine. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't a rush. It was quiet, fragile, the way you'd hold something breakable. For a long time, we stood like that, side by side, her thumb brushing the back of my hand once. Barely a movement, but enough to change everything. No declarations. No promises. Just the shared weight of something we could no longer deny. Finally, she leaned the slightest bit closer, her shoulder brushing mine, her head tipping just enough that I could feel the warmth of her near. Not resting, not asking, just allowing. And in that small, unremarkable gesture, I felt the collapse, not into chaos, but into something we'd both been circling all along. We didn't call it love. We didn't call it anything. We just stood there, holding the silence like it was enough. I think about that night more often than I'd admit out loud. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. We didn't kiss. We didn't make promises. We didn't rewrite our lives in one sudden sweep. Instead, we stood there with our hands folded together, two people who should have walked away long before, and somehow didn't. Looking back now, I realized that was enough. More than enough. She taught me something I didn't know I was ready to learn. That connection doesn't have to be loud to be real. It doesn't have to fit anyone's definition but the two people standing in it. With her, silence carried weight. Pauses meant more than words, and even the smallest gestures, the brush of her thumb across my skin, the way her shoulder leaned into mine, felt louder than any declaration. And I think I changed, too. I stopped measuring love by speed, by fireworks, by whether it looked like the stories I'd been told it was supposed to. I started seeing it in fragments, in tired eyes that softened when they trusted me, in laughter that slipped out when she wasn't guarding herself, in the way regret can turn into longing, and longing can turn into something close to peace. As for her, I don't know all the ways I changed her. Maybe I reminded her of someone she lost. Maybe I gave her a reason to feel young again, if only for a moment. Or maybe, and I hope this is true, I simply gave her a place to breathe. We never named what we had. Maybe we never needed to. Naming things has a way of trapping them, of forcing them to fit. What lived between us wasn't meant to be caged by a word. All I know is that when I walked home that night, I carried something with me I didn't have before. The certainty that love, or whatever this was, doesn't always arrive with clarity. Sometimes it comes quietly, on tired nights, in quiet bookstores, between people who never expected it. And if you're listening now, wondering why I'm telling you this, maybe it's because part of me wants you to look at your own life, your own missed glances, your own silences, and wonder what might be hiding there. Because sometimes the most important stories don't end with a kiss. They end with a hand held too long, a pause too heavy, a silence that says everything. And maybe that's enough. So, tell me, have you ever had a moment that didn't look like love, but felt like it anyway?